This is the part 3 of .NET Core interview questions. In this part, we will discuss the very important and basic files in .NET Core, which are Program.cs file and Startup.cs file. We will see what they do and what they contains. Here are the questions which we will see here. What is the role of Program.cs file in ASP.NET Core? What is create host builder and create default builder method? What is the role of startup.cs file? What is the role of configure services method? What is the role of configure method? What is the difference between configure services and configure method? So let's start with the first question. What is the role of program.cs file in ASP.NET Core? Or what is create host builder and create default builder methods? Program.cs file is the entry point of the application. When you will create any .NET Core application, then inside the project you will automatically get this file program.cs file here. This is the code of the program.cs file. Inside this file you will get one method which is the main method. In short, I will say program.cs file is the entry point of the application via main method, which means whenever any request will come from any client, then main method is the first point of contact for it. So you know now what is main method in program.cs file. It is the entry point for any incoming request. Now what is create host builder method? Create host builder method will build and set up the host server like Kestrel and IIS, which will host the application on web servers. Without this method, this application will not behave like a web application. Here is the definition. The create default builder method will set up the default web server setting for the application, and then run method will send the request to the startup class. Here we are calling the startup class with the help of create host builder method and lambda expression. If you have not worked in lambda expression earlier, then don't worry. Just remember that from program.cs file we are calling the startup.cs file, and that's it. So let's revise this. Program.cs file is the entry point of the application via main method. Create host builder and create default builder method prepare the default setting for web server for this application. Then the run method will call the startup class. This is all about the program.cs file. Next question is, what is the role of startup.cs file? Here is the default content of startup.cs file you will see when you will create a blank web application in .NET Core. And here in the diagram you can see the flow. Program.cs file is the entry point, and then it will redirect the request to the startup.cs file. Now you already know program.cs file has main method which is used as the entry point, and then with the help of create host builder it set up the web server setting for the application, whereas startup.cs file has two main functionalities. It configures the services which are required by the app by using configure services method. It defines the request handling pipeline as a series of middleware components by using the configure method. So basically startup.cs file only contains three things. One is the constructor, which is here also, and second thing is the configure services method, and third thing is the configure method. We will discuss these two methods separately in next questions. So let's see. What is the role of configure services method? You already know this diagram. When the application is start, first the program.cs file will run, then startup.cs file will run, then inside the startup.cs file, first the startup constructor will run, then configure services method will run, and then the configure method will run. So configure services will always run before the configure method. Now let's see what is the configure services method. So here it's a sample configure services method is in the screenshot. Inside the configure services method, you can add any number of services inside this method. But whether the service will execute or not, that depends whether you have used these services in application or not. For example, in the screenshot you can see we have added one service, and that is add controllers with views, which will help controllers to run this application. But if client will request an HTML page like customer.html, then this service is not required at all. So these configure services methods are optional. You have also seen the use of configure services method in the dependency injection example. Remember how were registering our dependent classes in our web application. So that is the use of the configure services method. Inside this, you can register the interface and their respective correspondent classes. So let me make it more simple. Suppose you are creating an online shopping cart, and these are the basic features which you are going to include: product management, cart, payment method, coupons, multiple language support, and there may be many more features. But whenever a request will come, it will, so all these are the external features which you will register, or you can say these are all classes: shopping cart, product management, payment method, and all these you will register here inside this configure services method. But whenever a request will come, it will be either for payment or for adding the item into the cart. It will not for both. So the request will use only one of these services and rest of them will not be hit. So that's why all other methods, or you can say services, will be optional. And maybe all the services inside the configure services can be optional. So that's why configure services method is optional. Now let's see what is the configure method. What is the role of configure method in .NET Core? Again, the same diagram. After the configure services method, we will see what is the configure method. So here is our default configure method in our startup class. So first of all, the definition is configure method will configure the request pipeline. Now what is the request pipeline? Request pipeline meaning all the methods written over here will definitely execute. Is development, use static files, use routing, use authorization, use endpoints. All these methods are the part of the request pipeline and they will definitely execute in the same order. Okay, they are not like configure services method which are optional. So whenever a request will come in the application, it will execute all these methods in this sequence. Therefore, they are not optional. These methods are also called middlewares. We will discuss middleware in detail in another question. Configure methods specifies how the app responds to HTTP request and response. It is used to set up request pipeline. Now I hope you understand what is the difference between configure services and configure method. But that can be a different question also. So what is the difference between configure services and configure method then? So here in the diagram we have both these methods, configure services and configure. So the difference is configure service is an optional method used to register dependent classes inside the DI container. So if you know what is dependency injection, you know what is the use of configure services method. Configure method is a different method. It specifies how the app responds to HTTP request and respond. It is used to add middleware components or set up a request pipeline. So that's it, all about configure services, configure program.cs file and the startup.cs file in this part. In the next part, we will cover some more questions on .NET Core.